Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started in just 1 minute. Hello and welcome again. If we're going to get started in just 1 minute, if you want to say hello in the chat box, let us know where you're joining us from. All right, looks like we have a good spread across the country. I am going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. Your phone line is muted. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording and slides will be shared afterwards. Welcome again to our webinar on how college access programs are helping students navigate this summer. My name is Leslie Gabay-Swanston, Director of Program and Systems Quality at the National Summer Learning Association. Before we get started, here's an overview of our discussion today. First, I'll show a little bit about NSLA for those of you who are unfamiliar before we hear from our expert panel. And after that, we'll have some time for questions from the audience and then wrap up with some announcements about upcoming events. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A box so we can see them. It's a little hard to keep track of in the chat box, so if you put them in the Q&A box, we'll be sure to see them and ask them live. The National Summer Learning Association is the only national nonprofit exclusively focused on addressing the achievement and opportunity gaps by increasing access to summer learning opportunities. NSLA's goal is to increase nationwide the number of high-quality summer learning programs. To achieve this goal, NSLA recognizes and disseminates what works, offers expertise and support for programs and communities, and advocates for summer learning as a solution for equity and excellence in education. NSLA's work is driven by the belief that all children and youth deserve high-quality summer learning experiences that will help them succeed in college, career, and life. Core to our work is the recognition that high-quality summer learning programs work and have been shown to improve reading and math skills, school attachment, motivation, and relationships with adults and peers. We know that summer is a time of great inequity for young people, and we believe that promoting and supporting summer opportunities is a way to address this. This goes beyond the summer learning that's in our name. We also want to see programs and communities addressing access to other resources like meals and youth employment. Summer is a time for innovation and exploration. Without some of the constraints of the school year, kids are able to try different ways of learning, interact with other adults and peers that they might not otherwise. It's also a time of innovation for adults, whether that's opportunities for professional development, trying out new teaching methods, or exploring new partnerships. So I'm happy to welcome our first speaker, Lindsay Page, Associate Professor of Research Methodology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Education, who will give us some background on the summer melt and the importance of college bridge programs. Lindsay?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. So I have exactly one slide on summer melt, what it is, why it happens, and then I'm going to share with you work that I've done in collaboration with Georgia State University, so you can hear a little bit about how at least one university system is thinking about tackling summer melt for their student population. So if you go ahead to the next slide, this is a slide that I use to represent summer melt. Thank you. So what we have in this slide is essentially a maze that between getting admitted to a particular institution and committing to attend that institution and actually enrolling in college, this represents sort of the maze of tasks and responsibilities and activities that students and their families need to be navigating in order to successfully make the transition to college in the fall. So we see things here like completing applications for financial aid. A lot of students get caught up in what we refer to as FAFSA verification, where they have to provide additional documentation. I think one of the biggest things, and we'll hear this from the other partners, I'm guessing, is that it's a period of time when students and their families don't typically have access to guidance and support, and yet it's a period of time where they have to navigate a lot of paperwork, and they especially have to navigate the weighty family decision of paying for college, sort of coming to grips with the financial reality of paying for college. And so this is really amplified this particular summer when we add to it the financial uncertainty that a lot of students and families are facing, and the uncertainty that they are seeing from their own universities in terms of what college is or may look like in the fall. So it's not, it wouldn't be a surprise to me if we saw greater rates of summer melt this summer, both because families and students may be kind of waiting out the storm, and they may not feel as though they're in a financially safe situation in order to make the financial commitment to go to college. If you go ahead to the next slide, what I'd like to do is share with you work that I've done in collaboration with Georgia State University. Georgia State University is an urban campus. It's located in Atlanta, Georgia. And Georgia State University recognized high rates of summer melt among students who had reported, sort of signaled their commitment to attend the university. And they found that even though when students who had signaled their commitment to enroll at GSU, when they didn't show up, through looking at other data sources, they found that those students indeed were not enrolling anywhere. So just a little bit about the GSU campus. At GSU, the majority of incoming students are Pell eligible, and about a third of their admitted students are first generation college goers. So they are serving large shares of the population that we often think of as most at risk for summer melt. This work that I'm going to share with you is a research collaboration among myself, Georgia State University, and a technology partner called AdmitHub. They are absolutely fabulous, but I feel the need to tell you that I'm not here to sell you a product, and I get no financial gain from telling you about the great work that AdmitHub has done. So my role in this work was really to advise on the development of the support that they were providing to students, and then to do the analysis to understand what impact it was having. So if we go ahead to the next slide. What AdmitHub built for Georgia State University was and is, GSU is still using this, an artificially intelligent chatbot system. The system could provide students with reminders, guided tutorials. It can also implement surveys. And if we go ahead to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit more about how Georgia State sort of built out what they refer to as Pounce. Pounce is the GSU mascot, to provide outreach and support to students. Before the webinar began, we were just chatting about the best ways to communicate with students, particularly over the summer. My work has absolutely shown that text messaging, at least for now, is the most successful way to reach students, to communicate with them, have the greatest likelihood of students actually getting back to you. And so what AdmitHub built for Georgia State University is a text message chatbot. The chatbot would reach out to students sort of at the right time during the summer about all of the different task areas that you see represented on the slide. So things like FAFSA submission and verification, submitting their intent to enroll form, registering for and attending orientation, so on and so forth. All of the administrative and procedural tasks that students and their families need to be navigating over the summer. The other thing I'll say about this is that the Pounce system was able to be integrated with the university student information system. So outreach to students was data informed. So what does that mean? It basically means, as an example, if a student had already submitted their FAFSA and there were no issues or problems with that FAFSA, then those students were not receiving any communication about FAFSA. We tried to be very targeted in reaching out to students only on the topics where they needed a reminder, where they weren't meeting the specified deadlines from the university. If you go ahead to the next slide. This is just on this slide, and on the next slide, I just want to give you an example of the architecture that sort of undergirds this system. So you can see that this starts, this is about something very mundane, parking on campus. It starts out by asking the question of whether students plan to park a car on campus. And depending on whether the student says yes or no, the system can guide students to provide them with the appropriate information. So this is a simple example, but if you look on the next slide, you'll see that the architecture for providing students with information, you can probably guess that this is about financial aid. So this is I know, Jake, I can see your eyes go wide. There are many steps that students need to navigate in order to access financial aid. There are many ways that students can go wrong. And so this was a system of Q&As and guiding students through all of the steps that they need to complete in order to access their financial aid. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So one other thing, this is a picture of Pittsburgh. I am located in Pittsburgh, and in Pittsburgh we have all of the Uber self-driving cars. So the artificial intelligence of the self-driving cars is much like the artificial intelligence that undergirds the AdmitHub chatbot system. So when students respond to the prompts that they are receiving via text message, students can write in with closed-ended yes/no type responses that would trigger a given message. Students can also write in with a more free-form message. And if the system can recognize the question with high enough fidelity, then the system will, through its artificial intelligence, respond to the student's question right away. And so because of this, students were able to get, for the most part, real-time responses to the questions that they were writing into the system with. We can go ahead to the next slide. It was not always the case that the system could answer every single question that students had. Again, here's an example of kind of a fun and mundane question, a student wanting to know if he can bring his dog to campus. So the system is really able to recognize the large majority of questions that students ask. And I think that's important because what it tells us is that over the summer, a lot, not entirely, what students can benefit from is sort of easier access to information in bite-sized chunks where it's easier to digest. But it's absolutely not the case that a system like this can answer every single question or help students navigate every single challenge or problem that they may have. And so because of that, when the system could not recognize and answer a question from a student, then it was able to route that question to the appropriate person on campus. And in that way, the system can trigger all of the knowledgeable and supportive adults on campus to follow up with the students as needed. So we can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. I'll be very quick on this slide. As I said at the beginning, we did evaluate this through the context of a randomized controlled trial. I'm a researcher after all. So we really wanted to ask the question of whether investing in this kind of system was worth it for the university, whether it was having returns for students. So these are just some of the details of the experimental study that we implemented. And if we go on to the next slide. Thank you. What we found, a couple slides ago, I had talked about The system routing questions to university staff when the system was not able to respond to the question automatically. What this slide is meant to represent is how the system essentially learned over time and got better at answering students' questions. You'll see in the yellow bar up at the top, really over time, a small share of questions that were incoming from students needed to be directed to staff. And really over time, the system got to the point where it was able to respond automatically to about 80% of queries from students. So we can go ahead to the next slide. This is just meant to represent some of the results that we saw from the implementation of Pounce. The sort of top line finding at the top of the slide is that for students who did not receive outreach from Pounce, these were students who had committed to enroll in Georgia State University. About 85% of those students did enroll in time. And in fact, the outreach from Pounce and the opportunity to engage with the university in that way increased timely enrollment by a statistically significant 3 percentage points. And what we found also was that the system was helpful in helping students navigate all of the tasks that we had hypothesized can contribute to summer melt. So students were more successful in navigating their financial aid related tasks. They were more successful at doing things like submitting their transcripts and attending orientation and so forth. If we go to the next slide, this is really my wrap up slide. If you would like to learn more about this particular study, this is a citation for the paper. I want to recognize my collaborator, Hunter Gelbach, in this work. What I want to share also is that the university was quite happy with the findings from this study and how they were able to use this system. And they have since rolled the system out to all of their students in the summer transition. And they're continuing to use the system to support students once they are enrolled on campus. And I will say that in talking with Tim Rennick, who has really overseen a lot of this work, this kind of system and the ability to readily communicate with their students via text message was incredibly important for them as they worked with students to navigate supporting students to move out of their dorms and so on and so forth during the shutdown of the campus because of the coronavirus. And so particularly at a time like this, having a system, it doesn't have to be this system in particular, but having a system that gives you ready access to communicating with students and the ability to reach out to them proactively, I think will be important aspects of nonprofit organizations, any student-focused organization supporting students during this very uncertain time. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Next, we'll hear from Jake Weinfeld, Executive Director of Merit, an NSLA Summer Learning Award-winning program. Jake?
Thanks, Leslie, and great to learn from you, Lindsay. That was really cool and interesting work. So my organization, Merit Health Leadership Academy, supports about 200 high school students in Baltimore from 9th grade through senior year, and then about 100 alumni of our program in college. So I'll talk a little bit about the program overall, and then more specifically what we're doing to support our seniors right now and their matriculation to college. So the program is Saturday sessions and summer internships. The Saturday courses allow scholars to learn a lot of advanced science skills, learn about health disparities in Baltimore and beyond, and the sorts of ways that those disparities can be addressed as they go on to become public health professionals, doctors, nurses, researchers, and more. Our Saturday courses also focus a lot on SAT preparation. We're really proud that we've had over 200 points of SAT growth for the past several years, and then helping our scholars through each aspect of applying to and matriculating to college. So in the overall merit trajectory, there's 3 summer internship experiences for our scholars in 9th grade. Students are working in laboratories or in between 9th and 10th grade. In between 10th and 11th, the scholars are working in hospitals. And in between 11th and 12th, the students are working in a community health setting. So as you can imagine, none of that is happening in that form this summer. So it's pushed us to think of what we do in new and different ways. For our seniors, our senior year curriculum focuses a lot on matriculating to college. And I think we've seen that this year in particular, for those colleges and universities that don't have a streamlined communication system like what was just overviewed, the type of information that our students are receiving can be very confusing and hard to digest and deduce what requires an action and what is just informative. So when we were together in person, we were beginning to sit down with our students and their families to understand acceptance packages, understand financial aid packages, and to go through the financial aid verification process. Our students served are around 90% from low-income families, and about 2/3 are prospective first-generation college students. And many of them are selected for financial aid verification, which can often feel like a daunting process. So as that support has moved online, we've really tried to rely on the individual relationships that have been created between staff and mentors and students throughout the program to ensure that that we can help them and be an ally in understanding all the steps that need to happen to successfully enroll and matriculate into college. This has looked like a lot of text communication, a lot of setting up individual Zoom meetings with a student and sometimes a family member where we're having them open up their email box and open up emails because unlike what Lindsay was saying with that app, the norm of how universities are communicating information is not in bite-sized chunks. It's more chunky than bite-sized. So we help them kind of read through the steps they need to take and figure out what they need to do. Another thing that we've found a lot of success with and that we're trying to double down on this summer to keep our seniors engaged is allowing them to serve as mentors and teaching assistants for the younger students in the program. We've found that as senioritis kicks in, and after a college acceptance happens, that sometimes students want to just kind of relax and not be as engaged with a program that they've already done a ton of work with, like Merit. But if they're engaged to help a younger student, that really is a hook that keeps them involved and wanting to come back. So many of our seniors are signing up to be mentors and teaching assistants in our virtual programming model for this summer. And that keeps them really actively communicating with us and allows for a lot of touch points to figure out if something may be going on or there may be a roadblock to the college matriculation process. So I'll pause there. Leslie, are we taking any questions now or do all questions wait till the end?
So we'll take the questions at the end, but if you do have questions for any of the panelists, feel free to put those into the Q&A box and we'll get to those later. All right, so we will go on to our next presenter. Thank you, Jake. Stephanie, let's see. There we go. I'm happy to welcome Stephanie Fiorelli, Deputy Director of Alumni Success for the Urban Assembly. Steph.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks, Leslie. I'm really happy to be here today talking about the Urban Assembly's Bridge program. the Urban Assembly has been around since 1997. And since then, we've been committed to supporting small public schools in New York City. If we can, I'm trying to go to the next slide, Leslie. It's not letting me. Thank you. Most of the work we do is in coaching and building resources for the adults inside the building. Our alumni team, which is what I'm on, is the only team that supports students directly. And we do this through our summer bridge program and then through our alumni texting campaign. Today, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about our summer bridge program. Summer Bridge has been around at the UA since about 2008. But we did an overhaul of the program 4 years ago to better address the melt that continued to happen with our students. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what our program looks like, and then I'll get into how it looks different this year with COVID-19. The UA has 20 high schools, so we hire 20 alumni to coach there at their alma mater's senior class from May through August. This year, one school has 2 coaches, which is why we have 21. Coaches assist all seniors with the crucial paperwork, appointments, and preparation that will secure their post-secondary path, whichever path that may be. Now, most of our near 1,500 graduates do enroll in college, but because about 25% don't, we talk a lot at the UA about how we can make the term summer melt more applicable to what's happening with our students. If they choose not to attend college intentionally, did they really melt? It's one thing that makes, I think, our program different than others, our commitment to all post-secondary pathways. It's sort of why we rebranded from Bridge to College to Summer Bridge. And in fact, this year we hired our first non-college going coach. The other thing I want to point out about our program is that we emphasize professional growth and development of our coaches. So professional development workshops, midterm reviews, weekly reflections that encourage coaches to think deeply about how they're honing and growing skills. Oops. I don't want to delve too much into this, but we are very data driven here and feel strongly that, you know, the more a student connects with her coach after high school graduation, the more likely she is to follow through with her post-secondary plans. So we stress reciprocal contact between coaches and students. And given that our melt rate is about 11%, which is lower than most organizations who support similar populations, we think it really pays off. 2 stats I want to point out here are that nearly 3/4 of all students talk to their coach at least once after they graduated high school. And what's not on here is that more than half did so between 2 and 4 times, and more than a third did so more than 5 times. So it's an incredible amount of connection with a bridge coach, especially considering that students don't have to talk to them if they don't want to. They choose to talk to them. As you can see, most talk to them in person when they're still in high school, and then they transition to text, typically during the summer. As we know, times have changed. Because we stay connected to alums over text, to everyone's point early on, we have insight into their well-being. So we know that typically 45% of our students, our alumni, are food insecure. Knowing this, when COVID-19 hit, we rushed to implement an emergency funds program. And on that application, which you can see at the top here, 70% indicated that they needed money for food. You know, this informs our bridge coaching quite a bit. We've trained coaches to do more wellness checks and to listen with empathy, which is sort of informed by this grow model of coaching, where first you decide where you're going, which is the goal, where you are, which is your reality, your current reality. And then you explore your options. And then finally, the W is will, because you will yourself to stay committed to the journey. There are other ways that COVID has caused our program to pivot. Typically, coaches work out of the school building 3 days per week and out of the UA office in hubs once a week. This summer, everything happens virtually. We've trained on Zoom and Google Classroom. We set up a Slack workspace for communication and workflow, which the coaches are really loving right now. And even though coaches are new to this, I mean, for many, it's their first job ever. They're really taking off at full speed. They're learning a lot about digital communication, and they're already passing that knowledge onto their students. And due to the relaxed graduation requirements in New York City, their caseloads are larger now than ever before. New York City has relaxed some of their regents exam, all of their regents exam requirements, and this has created a much larger population of students who are able to graduate, which is really great. We've revved up our training around non-college options too, such as training programs like Year Up or NPower, and we're even talking to them a lot about the civil service. In some cases, students, because of what's going on right now, might not feel ready to tackle college. And so we just want to make sure that our coaches are prepared to talk to students about all options. You know, we want our students to be empowered by those options, not overwhelmed by absence. A big part of how we've been able to pivot is that the Urban Assembly is part of an informal citywide bridge consortium, which I'm going to, yep, here we are. So this sort of informal partnership includes our affinity group partner New Visions, as well as organizations like iMentor and College Bound, who've been supporting students for years. It also includes CARA, as well as this it's been around for 2 or 3 years, College Bridge for All, which is funded through the DOE and CUNY. It's a really great partnership between the public school system and CUNY, which is our public college system. All of us share resources, best practices, and now we share up-to-date information on the changes happening at colleges in New York State in particular. It's a tremendous breath of fresh air. You know, no one's proprietary, everyone's sharing everything. I mean, down to even the training materials. It's really incredible how we've banded together. And together we're supporting, as it says here, 25,000 students in New York City. Because we work together, we avoid this sort of overlap in service, which often happens when nonprofits are, when there's a lot of nonprofits inside big cities. You know, for example, College Bridge for All, the director will, you know, reach out to me and just say, you know, here's a list of the schools that we're planning to support. Can you make sure that UA schools aren't on there? I mean, essentially, we just don't want to, you know, we don't want a school to get duplicative support, because we want to make sure that the most students who can get support can. You know, in other words, if one high school is getting their bridge program from the UA, they don't need it from someone else. It just streamlines support and it creates efficiency. And then finally, what's next, right? So we at the UA are thinking about how to leverage what we've learned during this virtual summer. So far, Slack has been a success. As I mentioned here, you can see on the left some of the communication that our coaches are having with each other about how to insert hyperlinks. And it's really incredible how they're really like feeding off of each other. Google Classroom was a big success, and Zoom has been a success. So there's no reason to abandon any of this next year when this crisis passes. Coaches are engaging incredibly. They're learning and getting excited about their work. And as I mentioned before, what's most important is that they're helping each other and they're learning how to be 21st century professionals. It's incredible to watch, and I can't wait to see where we end up in August when coaches and now their students head off into the fall.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we'll hear from Carlos Silberger, coordinator of college-going culture of the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Carlos Silberger, and thanks so much for having me here today. I'm going to speak a little bit. It's actually a little bit weird to be on this call, because I'm going to be speaking about something that I don't think I'm an expert in. We are piloting a summer melt program this summer in our organization around community strengthening and transition. And so, but I think the idea is that maybe, since I'm going through this right now, I might be able to provide everyone with a little bit of an insight into, number one, what we're trying, and some of the very specific challenges that come with trying to build something like this at this moment. And I will do my very best to answer questions for those of you who are thinking of doing something similar, about how it's been working so far, and where I would recommend spending some time. So a little bit about the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, and I only put this here because we are a very unique organization, and so I want to provide you a little context that hopefully will be helpful. We are an in-district public school transformation organization. And what that means is that we manage 18 schools that are part of LAUSD. We are not a charter management organization. We are not a school district. We're a nonprofit organization, but we have a memorandum of understanding with the LA School District to manage schools in 3 neighborhoods, feeder patterns, elementary through high schools. And our focus is really on building capacity of the adults who surround our kids. We don't work with students. We don't do everything that a district does, but we try our best to support the adults so that they can then do a better job in the work that they do to support our kids in our communities. And then a sort of second part of that, which doesn't really relate to what we're talking about today, is that we also focus on systemic change throughout LAUSD. So because we manage schools, we're able to see where there are some barriers that are inhibiting communities like the ones we serve from being successful, and then we work with the district to alter that. Okay, so with that context, a little bit about our summer melt data. As you can see, this is over the last 2 years. We send a very small number of students to private and out-of-state colleges, so I didn't even include that here. But for the students that we send to the University of California, our summer melt rate is 10%. For those that are going to the California State Universities, primarily those locally here in California, it is 22% melt rate. And for those going to community colleges, 28. And just to let you know, we collect this data from students in the spring. We're doing it right now. And then we look at the National Student Clearinghouse data coming out in the fall. And that's how we determine our melt rate, seeing how many students told us they were going to schools when they left in the spring, but didn't actually make it. And it's also worth noting that up until now, our organization has done nothing around summer melt. LAUSD has paid counselors to be around during the summer, and so we've supported with that. We have some partner organizations like College Track that do some of this work, and we support with that as well. But ultimately, what we found is that when you pay counselors to come in the summer, a lot of them get asked to do things that are not around summer melt. They get asked to work on the schedule. They get asked to support with summer school supervision. And so if we were really going to tackle this issue, we were going to need to take a larger step at producing a pilot that we could then ask our schools to replicate, ask our partners to replicate. And so we started looking at this data and figuring out, we're a small organization, we have a limited budget, we received a grant to support with this pilot. How do we can't do everything, we can't help everyone, so where do we target our supports and our energies? And so with that, if we go on to the next slide. Great, so here's what we came up with. We started off by realizing that if this was going to work, we were going to need near-peer advisors, because the situation of transitioning to college is such that if those of us who went to college quite a few years ago under very different circumstances were to be the ones doing this advising, chances are we are not going to be successful. And we happen to have 2 college success advisors already within our network. These are people who are a year removed from college graduation. And so we asked them if they could sort of manage this work, and they agreed. So the program is going to be supported by people who are 1 year removed from college attendance themselves. We decided to focus on a small number of high-need, high-impact destination colleges, because we knew supporting every student going to every school was going to make it much more difficult, especially in year 1. So we looked at the 2 community colleges and the 2 Cal State universities where we had the highest number of students matriculating and are only supporting students going to those 4 schools. That's the only thing we're doing. Again, UCs, we didn't have a lot of summer melt, so we didn't really need to work on that. And we felt like we could build partnerships with the colleges if we did it that way, in a way that was going to be much more effective than just having a general support for students attending any school. we decided that we wanted to focus on building community among students. Again, our program is very short. We're starting it next week. It's going through the end of July. And then my college success advisors go off to the next thing in their world, and I go on to helping next year's seniors. And so we needed, so we're trying to think about how we could build a system that could continue to live after we can't help anymore. And we figured that if we were able to bring together a group of students from our 5 high schools who are all going to the same destination college and have a series of meetings over the summer, virtually, obviously, we would be able to build a community where they would then continue supporting each other, even after we can't do it anymore. And so that's the goal, is to do that. We decided to start early. We know that students are way hard to reach once school's ends. It's hard to reach them now anyway. And so like I said, we are starting next week. And there'll be 6 meetings over the next 8 weeks for them to get a chance to meet each other and get coached and supported towards this. We decided that we wanted to focus a lot on introducing students to college resources. And a lot of this came, honestly, as we were contacting our partner colleges, and we asked them, you know, what do you think we should focus on? What do you think we should be doing with the students who are coming to your school? And they seemed just as lost as we were, honestly. It was really interesting. I mean, everyone is sort of navigating this moment together. And so we figured if we were able to connect our kids with the offices and the services at the schools that would normally be a part of an orientation, but this year is so much harder to do, that would be a good use of our time. And so we're partnering with the colleges to like bring in people from the orientation office and from other offices and centers, their TRIO programs, et cetera, so that they can, EAOP, so that they can meet our students can meet them, and we're able to make sure, again, there's another level of support that can outlive the program. And then finally, we want to focus on social emotional learning skills. You know, again, we only have 6 hours with them, but we figure if we could leave them with some very tangible skills that they could continue using, like how to manage their schedule, how to seek support, I feel like that might be a successful focus area. I think we went backwards. Great. So a couple challenges I want to leave you with. Again, we're in the middle of this, but a couple challenges that I want to leave you with. The first one is that it is a struggle to recruit students during this time period. Everyone has mentioned already how difficult communication is, especially now, and our counselors are overworked. If we were in the school sites, they would help us a lot to get kids involved. And so we've had to be super creative. We've gone through college access programs. We've gone through senior teachers. We're even in the process of trying to do a Facebook Live family engagement series to try to get families to encourage their kids to join. We're sort of doing everything we can to get kids interested in being supported. And I can't tell you if it's going to work or not. I'm hoping it will. As I mentioned, colleges are really struggling right now, and so a key challenge was they really couldn't help much. We're having to do some of the heavy lifting, but because they're struggling to reach out to kids, when you reach out to them and say, will you work with us, at least my experience has been a lot of them have said yes. I mentioned already the bridge to the fall. That's been a huge struggle since we're ending early, but we're working with a lot of our partner organizations like College Track to sort of hand over the students once we're done to other organizations who can help once we're done. And then finally, like I said, this is a one-time thing for us most likely. And so we need to then work on building capacity at the school site so that this can continue in future years. Hopefully we're building the model that as we go back to normal can continue. And with that, I want to thank you for including me, and I'm happy as well to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Carlo. So just a reminder again, if you have any questions for the panel, please go ahead and type those into the Q&A box. Also, if you have any good examples to share, feel free to share those in the chat as well. So I see quite a few questions about text messaging, so I'll invite our panelists to come back turn the videos back on so we can answer a few of these questions. So the first one was just around specific texting apps. And I think this was really for Jake and Stephanie, which texting apps you're using with your programs, with your kids.
Yeah, I mean, we use Signalvine, which tends to be on the expensive side, just to give you a sense of the scale. So we're texting about 4,000 alums, and we have 1.5 to 2 advisors who are texting back. Signalvine's great for the kind of automated text that Lindsay was talking about. It also gives you an incredible amount of data, which we use to program build. So we love Signalvine. I mean, I think especially it lets you use a lot of emojis and GIFs, which are really helpful in engaging students.
We're dealing with a much smaller number of students where we have really deep, intimate relationships. So the only kind of overall layered on texting platform that we've used is Remind, which is free or very, very low cost and works to meet our needs.
And then we have some questions just about what kind of questions to put into you're putting into your text. So when sending outreach texts, do you find that leading yes/no questions, for example, do you plan to attend college, or open-ended questions such as what are your plans for after high school are more effective? So which do you find more effective, those closed-end or open-ended questions with getting students to engage via text?
Well, I'll just say from a research perspective, when we've played around with that, we have generally seen that students are more likely to respond if you offer them a closed-ended question, sort of a yes/no question. But you also want to make sure that you have variety in the structure of your messages and the timing of your messages and the days that you're writing to students, so that it feels like authentic communication rather than something that is like, oh, they text me at 4 o'clock every Tuesday, and that must be some automated message. So I think it's good for messages to be really clear in the purpose of your message. What is the piece of information that you want to convey? What's the piece of information that you're looking to get from students? You don't want to inundate them, because that's going to close them down. Or make them less likely to attend to any one message that you send to them. So those are just some general reactions.
Yeah, and I think I agree, but again, it really it depends on what you're trying to do as a program. I think we tend to stay away from the close-ended ones, actually for the reasons that Lindsay had mentioned, where like our students nowadays are getting texts from a lot of different sources, especially here in New York City. They're often supported by multiple nonprofits, and CUNY has their own, texting program. And so I think, stand out from them a little bit. And also, even though we don't know our students, our alums who we're texting, we do know where their high school was. And we have some connections with the teachers they might have had, or their college counselors, or like our bridge program, right? So, the first text we send out to them, we'll name drop their bridge coach, and so they know that this is us, and it's very informal, in fact. And so we try really hard to keep things open-ended, because we've heard from them that students often they're asked to do so many different things, and to give so much information, and to reflect on what it means to be a low-income student, or a student from a low-income home, and a first-generation college student. So sometimes, we really are just trying to let them know someone's out there just thinking about you, and you can respond or not respond. It's up to you. And often that it takes a while, right? Like this, again, we text them for up to 4 years. So this is a marathon, not a sprint for us. And so we have the luxury of being able to slowly build a relationship with them. And our thinking is, if we can do this over text, the real payoff for us is when we send them surveys, right? So our thinking is, if they trust us and continue to engage with us, we're actually going to have a lot of information coming from them. So our survey response rate is almost 25%, and you're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students. And so I think that slow open-endedness does pay off, again, just for us, because that's what, our program goal is very different than others. And that's why I love talking about this stuff, because you can come at it from so many different angles.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I do think it's really important for all of us to think about how we're operating within the context of other services and messaging that our students are receiving. So for us, all of our students are in Baltimore City Public Schools. Baltimore City Public Schools Office of College and Career Readiness has Signalvine and is sending kind of general nudges out to all seniors in Baltimore to check in with them. So our role, particularly in this time, is to bring more positivity and social connection. So something that we're doing a lot of, like this year's, about 20% of our senior class is going to University of Maryland. So we're reaching out to those students and saying, hey, do you want to hop on a Zoom call with an alum from University of Maryland, or something like that that's more nuanced and gives them an opportunity to connect. But I think with that being said, the kind of mass outreach and nudging is really important to college matriculation work if our students aren't already getting that from another body or entity.
Great. I wanted to point out that a couple of links that have been posted in the chat box. I think Stephanie posted one from Signalvine on how to reach students via text. And I just posted one from the National College Attainment Network, a link to their summer melt resources. So we have a couple of the questions. Jake, you mentioned a little bit about this, but there's a question about the structure of merit. So is the program embedded in local middle and high schools?
No, we're an out-of-school time program available to students throughout Baltimore City Public Schools. So on any given year, we have students coming from 15 or 16 different high schools.
And then this question was directed at Merritt, but I want to open it to everybody. How is your parent engagement? What does that look like? This person is looking for ideas on how to engage with parents.
I can start, as a longitudinal program, we really focus on building trust and community at the start of the program. And what we've found as really important to that is helping parents build relationships with one another and share ideas, best practices, and challenges with one another, and not position our organization as the expert on parenting their children, but allow parents to really share and learn from one another. And so we focus a lot on that in 9th and 10th grade, and just being kind of part of those conversations more as a participant than leading from the front, just kind of being part of it. And I think that with that trust that's established early in the longitudinal trajectory of our program, that makes parents a lot more open to work with us when there's an issue with financial aid because taxes were filed incorrectly a year ago and we have to support them in refiling taxes, or things related to income and personal information that requires a lot of vulnerability and trust from our families. So yeah, I think really understanding that you have to build that trust up front to be a partner with families with all of the things that come up in the college matriculation process.
Stephanie, were you going to share something?
No, I mean, we don't really have communication with our parents, because we help our students once they've already graduated from high school. I mean, I think our bridge coaches, they do, and they are fearless. They will call the parents if they cannot get in touch with their students. And most of our coaches are Spanish speaking, which really comes in handy because a lot of our parents are Spanish speaking too. And sometimes that's a really great way of connecting. So I would say like on our alumni team side, not really. Summer Bridge, you know, a little bit. If a student is totally MIA, the coach will call home and track them down.
You have a question about staff training. So how often are you all training or retraining your advisors and coaches? Or maybe anybody want to share about what their training process is looking like right now?
Well, we're very small. Our alumni team is just 3 people. And we really only have one person who is texting the majority of the students. And then we have another person who kind of texts the older students, 22, 23-year-olds. So, I mean, we don't have a ton of training in that, especially with texting. I mean, I think we're all still trying to figure out how to do it. So a lot of it is like trial and error. But yeah, so, and we also we don't see ourselves as advisors because we don't have the capacity to walk them through the FAFSA. Like what we do is we try to motivate them to do that on their own or to seek help on their own. You know, a lot of what we do is pushing them to navigate and showing them some tricks and tips, but you know, we're not actually advising them on how to do things step by step because there's just too many students. You know, we'll send a text out and we'll be behind the computer for 4 hours just fielding messages, and we can't, you know, hop on the phone with a student or, you know, do anything like that. So a lot of it isn't so much advising as it is pushing them in the right direction.
So we have a question about alternative paths, and Stephanie mentioned a little bit about this. So the question is, do any of the programs include or connect with business internships to support alternative pathways? So maybe more generally, like how you're supporting alternative pathways for students.
I mean, I could talk again. I feel like I've been talking too much, but I mean, it's something that we like are hitting really hard, so to speak. We have a lot of our high schools partner with businesses. They're very career CTE, career and technical education focused. And so a lot of their board members are on emergency management committees and whatnot. So there are partnerships for students, internships as high school students. Then we also partner with Empower, which is a job training program here in New York City that connects students with you know, resources and internships for like technology. We don't partner with, but we strongly recommend Year Up. We have sort of informal relationships with civil service workers so that we can introduce them to students, but it's right now the only sort of formal partnership we have is with Empower. And yeah, I mean, we are trying to figure that out as well, because I think we've been so college centered. You know, it used to be college or bust, but now there's a lot of other things happening out there and we're trying to pivot. But yeah, that's a good question and something that we think about every day.
So there's a question, if you don't have a student's current information, what kind of messaging do you send to them to engage them, especially those who are not involved or familiar with your program? Are you ever working with students that you're not connected to before?
I'll mention that when we first started, our idea was to have our counselors give us like lists of students and where they're going, and then just start cold calling. And we quickly found out that that was a huge mistake. I mean, not only are most 17, 18-year-olds not going to answer their phone, period, but they're not likely to start a lengthy conversation with someone they don't know. And so we realized that the only way to really get in touch with them, at least for the first time, is really to go through somebody they know. And so, like I said, we started with counselors. We struggled because counselors are super overwhelmed, but some of them helped us by doing a first email or reaching out. We tried with teachers. That helped a lot. A lot of senior teachers have relationships with kids and they could help make that first connection. We tried with college access partners and other partners who are on school sites. But that seems from this year to be a need, is like you need to the kid needs to first hear from somebody they know, and then they can hear from you.
I just want to underscore that because I absolutely agree with that. And I'll say in the texting type work, as we've started with organizations like those that you're hearing, where the research world has gone is to say, well, what if the Common App, who has reached to hundreds of thousands of students, or the College Board, what if they take up this kind of text message work? And in general, or what if the federal government takes up this kind of text message work? In general, across a variety of different research studies I've seen, is exactly the point that Carlo is making, especially with text messaging. Those are not necessarily entities that students want to hear from or trust. And so issues of trust and students making sure that they know who it is that they're hearing from are critically important. And when we see more distance between the organization that's doing the outreach and the student, if there's not that relationship to build on, students are less likely to engage. They're more likely to opt out of the communication in the first place. And if we study this experimentally, we're generally less likely to see impacts, the kinds of impacts that we would hope that the outreach would have for students.
So I have one last question, and I know everybody's trying to get through this upcoming summer, but if there is a COVID flare up again in the fall and the school year is altered or postponed again, how are you thinking you'll be impacted or adjust? And this is for anybody.
I can share one way we're thinking about this for the support of our juniors right now. Typically focusing on the SAT is a huge part of our program. We each year see awesome SAT growth, and that changes the types of schools scholars can get into and the types of financial aid. And this current junior, next year's senior class may be applying to college without an SAT score after spending September through March or so in merit courses preparing for it. So the College Board did just say they think they're going to give the SAT August 29th, but I'm not so sure if that will really happen and if that will happen across the board. So we're really trying to think about how can we support our scholars' success in getting good grades in school, but also in building out the experiences that they can talk about in their college essay. Because I think if college admissions is just going to center on experiences written in an essay and communicated in a resume and grades, and for our juniors, we don't even know what grading will look like necessarily next fall if it's in a remote setting. I think we're really trying to double down on how do we help our scholars have experiences that can really help them shine in the college application process.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Thank you to our panel as well. Just a couple announcements. Be sure to look out for more announcements in our Voices of Summer webinar series. We have more webinars coming up next week on sports programs and virtual learning. And look out for also for announcements for National Summer Learning Week that will be July 6th to the 11th this year. And finally, if you're not following us on social media, that's the best place to keep updated on all the new announcements and activities and things that are happening, resources that we're putting out. So make sure to follow us there. Thank you again, and have a great day. Bye.